So then guys, the brand new Apple iPhone 16e has been announced and it looks incredible. But a lot of you guys are wondering, how does it compare to say the likes of say an iPhone 14? Well, technically it has actually replaced, because Apple no longer sell this phone anymore, even though just a few hours ago at the time making this video they did. And also it's replaced the likes of the iPhone SE 3rd generation, and in fact I've made a video about that very recently, so if you do want to check that out, that's just above me right now. But going back to the iPhone 14, the new 16e is technically replacing this phone, but what is the differences between the 16e and the original sort of iPhone 14? Well, the best thing we can do is review of specs today, comparing the differences between the normal iPhone 14 to the 16e. And let's get started then, and let's bring up the charts. So then, in this comparison review, what we have is we have the iPhone 14 on the left versus the iPhone 16 on the right hand side here. And let's begin. Now, let's get started first of all with the display type. Now, the iPhone 16e is borrowing a lot of technology from the iPhone 14, what we've talked about in leaks and so on and so forth. So we do actually have the exact same OLED XDR display inside both of these phones. So there'll be no differences here whatsoever in what you're actually going to see on your screen. So the technology is exactly the same, that's what I'm saying. And in fact, if we move over to the screen size, even the screen size is identical. We're getting a 6.1 inch on both of these phones this time round. So exactly the same. And as you can see from this picture too, we do not have dynamic island. We just have the notch at the top, the classic notch. So this is exactly the same. So no dynamic island. If you're a fan of that or wanting to get that, you will not get this on the iPhone 16e. But for the screen resolution, as I'm saying again, as these are the exact same screens, well, you're going to get the same resolution too. So you're going to get a 2532 by 1170 on both of these, and also the aspect ratio is exactly the same at 19 by 5 by 9. So no differences here whatsoever. And what that means then for that screen resolution, it does mean for the pixels per inch, you're going to get 460 pixels per inch. And this is kind of Apple's bar now. Even the 16 Plus and the 16 Pro models, for example, and the Pro Max even has 460 pixels per inch. So exactly the same here. No differences whatsoever. But one thing that you will not get, especially as the iPhone 16 does not even have this as a display refresh rate, and that is going to be sticking at 60 hertz this time round. It'd be very odd for the 16e to get 120 hertz ProMotion and the normal 16 and 16 Plus to get ProMotion, or not get ProMotion as it were. So yeah, it's going to be exactly the same. As I'll say again, exactly the same screen technology. And the same for brightness. This is great that we can get up to 1200 nits in HDR brightness, so this is good to see, but just be aware of this is exactly the same again. And then moving over to the screen brightness, well, it's exactly the same story. 1200 nits at HDR, no differences here whatsoever between both these phones. So yeah, same brightness, still really great outside. So yeah, no differences here whatsoever. But then moving over to the processor and CPU, and this is where things do definitely change. Obviously the iPhone 14, that had the A15 inside of it, and funny enough, it was the second year that Apple put an A15 in their baseline iPhone at the time. So the iPhone 13 had the A15, but that had a 6-core CPU and a 4-core GPU, but they bumped it up to the 5-core GPU inside the iPhone 14 normal. And this was the same one we actually got in the iPhone 13 Pro and the Pro Max. But what the difference is with the iPhone 16 is that you actually are getting the A18 now. And obviously this is a 6-core CPU with a 4-core GPU. So actually this is one less than what you're getting in the iPhone 14. But what I would be saying is obviously the graphics performance in the 16e is, even with those 4 cores, is way ahead than what you're getting with the iPhone 14. So just be aware of that. But we are still getting a 16-core neural engine. And obviously I would also say that the A18 is far more efficient, as you will see in a moment. But then moving over to the RAM amounts, we've had a bump up here. So we've got an extra 2 GB of RAM now out in the iPhone 16e. We actually had 6 gigabytes in the iPhone 14, so now we're up to 8 gigabytes. So that's mainly to do with Apple Intelligence that we'll talk about in a moment. And then for storage options, they're exactly the same offerings that we had. So when the iPhone 14 came out, it came with 128 gigabytes all the way up to 512 gigabytes, and the 16e is giving this too. So obviously the third generation iPhone SE, that had 64 gigabytes, so it's more than that now for their budget iPhone. So this is great news to hear there. Obviously no expansional storage because this is an iPhone. For operating system wise, they can both run iOS 18, but obviously iPhone 16e, what we'll talk about in a second with Apple Intelligence, it gets a load more goodies inside of it. But one thing I'd also say with the iPhone 16e, it definitely means now for the next 6 to say 7 years at least, you will be getting, yearly operating system updates in your phone, whereas the 14 won't be doing that. You probably only got about, say, 4 to 5 sort of years left inside of that phone instead. Then for the actual battery life, and this is a big change. And what we have here is that if you were to watch a video played on local storage on your iPhone, so this is not streaming it or anything like this, it's just stored on your storage, watching that, have it at the same sort of brightness, sound, everything like that, the iPhone 14 can watch that video up to 20 hours or keep looping it round, whereas the iPhone 16e can actually go up to 26 hours. What's incredible to actually get here. Big boost what we're getting over the iPhone 14. And one of the big reasons behind this also does help is obviously the C1 chip inside the 16e. What's the new cellular chip now? This is definitely helping now with efficiencies. And obviously the A18 is a really efficient chip too. But then for the actual battery life or the battery sizes, they're exactly the same battery. That's the crazy thing. As much as I said that we're getting more out of the 16e, the 14 and the 16e have the exact same 3,279 milliamp battery inside of them. But then moving over to wired and wireless charging, and this is where we do get a little bit of a difference. Obviously the iPhone 14 was one of the last iPhones that Apple was selling along with the SE third generation with a lightning port at the bottom of it, but now they've got rid of this altogether, so we do not have an iPhone with a lightning port anymore. But when we did, it had 27 watts for wired charging and 15 watts wireless charging, but obviously you did get MagSafe with the iPhone 14. With the iPhone 16e though, you do also get wireless 15 watts, but there's been no news of MagSafe. I don't think it actually has it inside the 16e, but you do get the USB-C port, and that also goes 27 watts. So really essentially what's changed here is that instead of having lightning, we have USB-C, and we don't have MagSafe in the 16e from what I can tell at the moment. Moving over then to the actual weight then. Well, the iPhone 14 came in at 172 grams. And the main reason behind that, I'd say, is probably because it had those two cameras on the rear, the ultra wide and the wide that we'll talk about in a moment, whereas the 16e only has one camera now on the rear. So obviously it's a little bit lighter. We're talking 5 grams, what is absolutely nothing. Do remember that if you got yourself, say, a tempered glass screen protector on your iPhone 14, that weighs around about 11 to 12 grams on its own. So yeah, you can see 5 grams is really going to be nothing between both these phones in weight. For water resistance, both of them have the exact same IP rating, so this is IP68. So this means that they can go into clear water up to 6 meters, up to 30 minutes. So this is really good, but obviously if you use seawater or other kind of water out there, then obviously you're going to get a very different result there. Then for ports then, like I did mention earlier, the biggest change is to do with charging, and that is we got Lightning on the iPhone 14, one of the last phones to actually have this, whereas the iPhone 16e has USB-C on the bottom, what is really great to see to actually have that. But then moving over to stereo speakers, both of them have stereo speakers, and it's likely they're both exactly the same speakers inside of them. So this is going to be 2 of them for both of these models. So this is good to actually have. And then for artificial intelligence, this is where a big difference is obviously the iPhone 14 does not support Apple Intelligence whatsoever, whereas the 16e does, and you get all the same goodies that you get in an iPhone 16 and an iPhone 16 Plus right now with all the Apple Intelligence features there. They are fully available on the iPhone 16e, and this is great news to hear. For Bluetooth technology, they're both Bluetooth 5.3, so there's no differences here. And then for Wi-Fi, they're both exactly the same again. We've got Wi-Fi 6 in both of these. We do not have Wi-Fi 6E or 7 in either of these phones. But then moving over to the rear cameras, this this again is something whether you could say possibly the iPhone 14 is a little bit ahead in one area, and that is it has an ultra wide camera. What was a 12 megapixel one, and it also had the 12 megapixel wide. But if you've been using that 48 megapixel ultra wide, what's on the iPhone 16 and the 16 Plus, or even on the Pros, just a normal wide one, you will know that this is a fantastic camera to use, the wide sensor, and it's incredible to actually have. And personally, I would trade this up to actually have that. Now, obviously, some guys are going to miss out on the ultra wide, but if you're coming from, say, an iPhone SE or something like this, obviously you never had that before. This is something you're not going to really probably miss out on. But that 48 megapixel also allows you to crop in a little bit more, to do a 2x zoom, so you're getting more detail as you crop in, whereas obviously with the 12 megapixel you wouldn't get that on the iPhone 14. But both of these can also record up to 4K video too. But then switching over to the front cameras, well, both of them actually have the same selfie camera. It's a 12 megapixel one. This was the same 12 megapixel camera that was introduced with the iPhone 12. It was in the 13 and on the 14 normal and the 14 Plus. And this has obviously been transferred over to the iPhone 16e, which is still a very good front-facing camera. Then for the actual price, and this is where it gets interesting. Obviously the iPhone 14, when it first came out, started at $799 for it, but obviously each year it's been reduced by $100, and just most recently, until the 16e came out, it was $599 on Apple's website, and it gave you the same amount of base storage. So Apple have matched this. This is what I'm saying. The 16e is a replacement for the SE third generation and also for the iPhone 14, what they were selling on their site. So now this is definitely a sort of similar kind of buy, as it were, but I would be saying the 16e for me is definitely a better buy for the same price. Obviously you do lose out on that ultra wide sort of sensor, and obviously you don't probably get MagSafe. I think that's the only other thing, but apart from that, this looks exactly the same. There's no kind of sort of differences there in kind of the pricing sort of structure, all the way up to 512 gigabytes. So yeah, just be aware of that. But with that then, what iPhone model will you be buying? Now, I will be honest with you, when the iPhone 14 first came out like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I wasn't a fan of it because it was literally an iPhone 13. It just literally had inside of it just one extra GPU core in that A15. So with this new 16e to replace it, I personally think it is a worthy difference there. If you compare to say the iPhone 16e to the 14, I think that's better sort of value than comparing it to, for example, the iPhone SE third generation, because obviously it's far more expensive. So I think it's definitely a better sort of upgrade over this phone than what you're paying for, where you got this for $430 on that one. But what are your opinions on it? Do you think the iPhone 16e is going to be a worthy buy to over the iPhone 14 and or even say the iPhone SE third generation? Well, let me know in the comments below. And with that as well, guys, it's time to wrap up this video too. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press the like button. And also, if you want to hear the latest Apple news and reviews like we've done today and comparisons, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Until next time, guys, I'll see you really soon. Take care. Bye-bye.